Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Speculation Station. I'm your host, Captain Ketter. I'm joined today again by TxHunniBadger,
Hello.
and we're coming at you today with some news. So, this feels a little bit awkward after showering our recent Worlds experience with so much praise from the new players both here in Texas and our friend in Arkansas, Bodie. But today we'll be discussing AMG's recent announcement in regards to organized play going forward. So today we're going to link the announcement in the description of the video below or in the description of the podcast episode. And we're going to go paragraph by paragraph and talk about our thoughts and what they have to say. So let's start off by the overview statement, which is basically saying that the Worlds Tournament represents the highest level of competition where players can challenge themselves presently. But it appears they're going to be doing away with the World system and replacing it with the Grand Tournament system, which will differ from the World system. They differ in the fact that they do not feed into a larger event, and there is no inherent ranking system, which in my mind sounds like they just have multiple competitive events that don't culminate into anything, which is something they also say here is that each spot doesn't culminate into a final event. Additionally, they say that the rewards for one grand tournament will be the same amongst all the others for the competitive season. I guess maybe not even competitive season, organized play season. And then they state that grand tournaments require less oversight, expense, and restrictions on which regions they can hold that can hold a grand tournament, meaning that they can increase the number of events across the world to service new communities and growing communities. All right, so let's go ahead and give our thoughts about that first paragraph on how do grand tournaments differ from the world system. Do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the in the introducing grand tournament announcement, they say in today's article we're going to look at the global competitive community, and this is going to be the next step forward, and will bring more competitive events to our communities around the world. So I read that and I was like, oh, that sounds great. We're going to have more competitive events for the communities around the world. Fantastic. However, reading the rest of it, and we'll get to that, is I don't see how a grand tournament differs from a World's Open qualifier or even a store championship, other than you have to have at least 32 people there. And so, since you're not going to have Worlds, you're not going to have World's Open qualifiers either. So, it's completely doing away with both of those things. And then you're going to have these grand tournaments, which they try to present it as a positive, but really it's just a negative. We're just losing worlds. We're not gaining anything different. We're not gaining anything more. We can, as a community, host our own grand tournaments, our own big events, whether they're World Open qualifiers or not, and we all still have the Worlds event at the end that we can meet at, or used to be able to meet at. And last year was my first Worlds, and I'm really, really glad I went now. But the reasoning they give is they say for the last two worlds, for the last 2 years, a number of players from all over the world have gathered at Adepticon to compete in the culmination of the World Tournament circuit. And they say it's an exciting moment for the lucky few who qualify, and it's becoming clear that format was constricting. I don't understand how that was constricting. This last tournament was the largest Armada tournament we've ever had. There was, 114 people on day one, and people from all over the world, Australia, Europe, Canada, all far reaches of the world came to play. They do make the comment of how it was too expensive for them to run with providing air travel and hotel reservations. And yeah, I can see that, but I think that there were far more international or people that traveled internationally on their own dime than won a World's Open qualifier and that AMG paid to get there. And a lot of this is also volunteer led. You had people that traveled from all over the country and all over the world to come and be a volunteer to judge. And that's how much the world's experience means to Armada players, that people would come to do that. So I really, I don't want this to just be me bashing, this new format, this new AMG or whatever. But what I'll say instead is I don't see the value here. I don't see what we're getting for what we're giving, because what we as a community are giving up is the world's championship where everybody meets, and what we're getting are, we're going to rename the world's open qualifiers to a grand tournament, and that's it.
Yeah, when I first read this announcement, I was a little bit shocked just by how abrupt of this change seems to be occurring. Actually, our Star Wars Armada has been somewhat insulated from a lot of the stuff going on at excuse me, a lot of the stuff going on at Atomic Mass Games in regards to rules changes and some other stuff that the other games have been going through. Like, I know Star Wars Legion went through a 2.0, and I don't play the game. I've listened to the game being played every now and then, but a lot of people were not happy with the rules changes that went through. Additionally, in Star Wars X-Wing, those people, while not under AMG, they were accustomed to getting new releases several times a year, and then under AMG, they now I don't think they've seen a single release, if my source on Discord was correct. So it seems to me that the focus of AMG is more so expanding their player bases in a lot of areas where it's seeing growth so that they can sell their product, but not building up player bases that are already present. So in that regard, I kind of understand why they would take away the Worlds invites, but not necessarily Worlds itself. And originally, I was not convinced that they did take away Worlds. Now I'm leaning towards the idea that maybe, okay, they probably did take away Worlds after I was reading this last paragraph, which was saying that each grand tournament will have an equal amount of reward as in any other grand tournament. So it would make more sense for Atomic Mass Games to remove the invite requirement for Worlds so that more people can come and experience Worlds. Because the idea of showing up for a one-day tournament and maybe getting in or not in the last chance qualifier, although in my experience and every other person's experience that I've talked to, it was definitely worth it. I think maybe other people didn't feel like there was something driving them to buy a ticket to fly across the world for a chance like that.
Yeah, I agree. The last chance qualifier is a great opportunity to go and get a last chance, especially if you're traveling with someone who has a World's invite already. We saw father-son duos, we saw friends that play Armada together travel, and one already had a World's invite and one entered into the LCQ. And so in those situations, it does make sense, because even if you don't make it out of the LCQ, you're still splitting the cost of travel and lodging and all of those things, and you have stuff to do. But what so AMG said with their store tournaments, that their store championships, you had to have 16 people to qualify for a World's invite. And now with the grand tournament, they're saying you have to have 32 people to qualify for a World's invite. Or I'm sorry, to qualify for a grand tournament. But you look at paragraph 4, and they say we consistently saw that player communities, especially developing areas where with simply a lower overall population being excluded for the chance to engage in Worlds circuit offered. It's for this reason that last year we added the possibility at the local store level. It did increase the numbers. Ultimately, it fell short of providing higher level tournament experience as we know it to important part of the game's overall ecosystem. So they're claiming that it's the less populated areas that they're trying to reach, but they're the ones that implemented the 16-person tournament rule. If they could have ran store tournaments with 4, 6, 8 people, I'm sure they would have had more. Those people in the lower area, like Relent from Australia, he drove, I think, 8 hours to play his closest Armada game. He doesn't have anybody who plays Armada within 8 hours of him. And so he went to a World's Open qualifier, and I think it had a handful of people there, and that's where he got his ticket. But how do you think that an area that couldn't get 16 people for a store championship is going to be able to get 32 for a grand tournament? That doesn't make any sense to me. And so it seems like it's just fluff that we're being sold of, well, this is our reasons, and I don't know. Halon's Razor says don't attribute malice to what can be attributed to ignorance. So I'm really trying not to attribute malice. I know there's a lot of naysayers out there that saying this is intentional and it's trying to kill the game and all those things, but regardless of what's behind it, it just doesn't make sense. Like I said earlier, it doesn't have any value added.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Kind of like what I said before. I do think they're just looking for new players to buy into the game because they're not releasing anything new for, well, Armada and X-Wing. So it kind of makes sense that they would expand their player base to sell more product rather than try to develop something new because that requires probably much more work for them. I do think it's a little strange that they would axe Worlds and the competitive play experience so much because if you don't have a final tournament, like a Worlds tournament, to where you can crown someone the Worlds champion, then like all competitive play is mostly meaningless, in my opinion. I do want to apologize because we were on different pages when we were talking about the announcement for the AMG's announcement. I was looking at the second link that they sent out, but now we're on the same page again. As regards to resources, I do agree. They put in a lot of resources into like the hotels and the flights for the people who won the World Open qualifiers on the regional scale, and I was surprised they ever did that. I think that was something that was left behind by FFG and not AMG. I'm sure they wanted to axe that and then use that budget for something else. And I would also like to say we don't know what the data is behind the scenes about the money situation for AMG and for them working in a for-profit area and having or being beholden to a major corporation ahead of them, above them. I'm sure that a lot of their decisions are not done with malice. I'm sure they're done in regards to like what's best for the company and what can expand their player base as much as possible so that not necessarily so that more people can enjoy the game, but from a business standpoint, they want to be profitable, make money. And so if they're not in development, then the way to do that is to expand the player base.
Yeah, I completely get that point of view, and I agree with you, but I think what they're missing is all of the product that they've already sold that's circulating out there. I mean, you can't stop people from reselling secondhand fleets or used fleets or whatever. And so it's really, they're not going to get it that way of, well, we'll just try and get new players, and instead of pushing out new product, the way they get more sales would be to push out new product so that people buy the new product and then they hang on to their old stuff. Like nobody that plays the game on a regular basis is selling off their old fleets to replace it with new stuff. They're keeping all of their old stuff and they're getting the new stuff. And that's what it looks like for expanding. If you want to have new players, that's how you're able to bring in new players, is to release new ships to get more of your already involved community out there and buying stuff, getting it on the shelves, requesting their local game stores to stock it or to order it, and then it comes in, because people also don't want to buy into a game that they don't see as getting supported. Why would I go out and spend $500 to buy some brand new fleets and, have the makings of what I can maybe put together as a fleet, when either I can spend a lot less money to get more stuff, on eBay or something, or I can just play a different game that I hope is going to be around longer.
So, which paragraph are we in? Number 4?
Yeah, that was the one where they're talking about overall population, and then it just continues saying that in 5 the countries had the luxury of being able to host regionals. Like what they're saying, they contradict themselves. And at the end of this paragraph in 5, They say, in the end, just how a plant cannot thrive without water, fertile soil, and sunlight, the game communities that lacked access to the complete player experience also struggled to thrive compared to those that did. The complete gamer experience is the world competition. It's the people that they get to go to Adepticon and play more in-person Armada in one weekend than they will get to in the year since or the next year. That's the complete player experience, and they're taking that away for everyone. I hope that these grand tournaments are successful. I hope that there are a bunch of them out there and people can show up and play and have fun and do well and they're supported. But I don't see people traveling across oceans to go to a grand tournament.
Yeah.
Here in the United States, we're very fortunate that we get a lot of access to these things. If Worlds was in another country, an ocean away, there's no way it would be as big as it was because the amount of US players that just aren't willing to travel would not be made up by the extra players that are in the region. And so, yes, we have huge events, LSO, SLO, Nova, GSG, LVO, all of those things, and they're very doable for us. But wonder how it's going to be for those European guys that, hopefully they'll get 2, 3, 4 grand tournaments also, because you have, I don't know, 10, 15 countries that are all playing in those tournaments, whereas in the US, it's a long drive or a plane ride for us, just in the same country, no passport needed.
If there is no, like I said before, if there is no like major tournament or culmination of all this competitive play, I really don't see why I should care about these grand tournaments. But also like I said before, this isn't just about Armada. This is all about like X-Wing, Armada, Shatterpoint, Marvel Crisis Protocol, and Legion. So collectively, they're axing the competitive play experience and the event that was Worlds, like which was great, an excellent experience for players and people who love the game.
Yeah, and it's great to be able to compare apples to apples, right? Like I mentioned last episode, so Texas is fortunate. We have 4 big events that we do that all culminate in the Texas Championship. And so basically, for those of you listening that might not know, we play Texas Open Part 2, Warzone, and the Lone Star Open. And then based on your total tournament points for your highest 2 events that you participate in, the top 8 get invited to the Texas Championship. And so the top 8 play, and then the winner of that tournament is the Texas champion. And it's a really cool circuit. And I won it last year. And I didn't make day 2 of Worlds. So where that comes into play is, let's say LSO does. I can't remember if Jordan won LSO, and I can't remember if he made day 2 of Worlds or not. But let's just use that as an example too. Let's say LSO becomes one of these grand tournaments, and one person wins, and then Nova's a grand tournament, and another person wins, and then there are 2 or 3 other tournaments in Europe, and then those guys win, and then in Canada there's one, and that guy wins. Well, how do you know who's the best? Like, you say, oh, well, my grand tournament had 38 players and yours only had 32, so my grand tournament's better. Like that, people like rankings. That people like the competition.
Yeah, otherwise you wouldn't play a competitive strategy game.
Right, and that's what Worlds provided. One champion. Uh, and this year it was won by Peter from Poland. Last year it was won by James from the UK. It was truly a world champion. And for a year they got to say, "I'm the greatest in the world." But you're not going to get that with grand tournaments. You're going to get almost like tribal China, in the ancient where it was ruled by warlords. Like you've got groups of guys, and then you've got one warlord who rules this area, but there's no unified emperor. I don't know. I don't see how AMG came to the conclusion that this was a good idea. And really, I don't see what they're, even if they took away the transportation and the lodging for the WOQ winners, the World's Open Qualifier winners, what is it costing them to like put? I mean, I paid $100 just for my wife and my badge. I paid for every ticket for that event. I'm sure they had concession sales. They had all kinds of stuff. I don't see how they think they lost money at Worlds. And if they did, then work on making it profitable. Don't just do away with it.
Yeah, I think each of those World Open qualifier invites included flight and lodging accommodations and the badge, right? So altogether, I think that comes out to at least $1,000 per player, like if you're not in the area already. So it makes sense that you can cut those and you can save some money. I do think based on the way this is presented to the players, they're acting like it's in the players' benefit that they're expanding organized play and they're going to support it more. But really, I think it's a cost saving measure, is what it looks like. So it's likely that they got a notification from Asmodee, the parent company, saying you need to cut back or find ways to trim costs because you're not as profitable as you want you to be. And so whenever I saw, well, I guess this is their answer to that. Whenever I saw their announcement a couple weeks ago about the organized play store championship kits for Legion specifically, and that they didn't have Worlds invites in them, I wasn't very surprised. Like, there was a medium amount of shock, I would say, but my thoughts were that they would probably get away with removing the Worlds invites from store championships because that method of invite was kind of flawed in my opinion because it was so difficult to get a tournament together sometimes in a lower player count area. And then it was also sometimes questionable the amount or the quality of player you would get. And previously, they were really concerned about having good quality players make it to Worlds. And so this year, doing away with Worlds feels like a reversal in their thinking. But what I thought they were going to do was have World Open qualifiers with Worlds invites, so you had an opportunity to get tickets, and then they would expand the number of tickets they would give out. So for something from like 4 to maybe the top 12, I thought that would make sense. And then when I read this the first time, I thought, okay, they're doing away with invites, but maybe they're just going to make Worlds an open experience where you come sign up like any other tournament. It's Worlds, so you're required to get there in order to play, but yeah, it would be an open experience and something great for all kinds of new players to go and experience, and for those new players to go and yeah, experience Worlds like we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks and how good of an experience that is. But reading through this a couple more times, I've kind of gotten the gist that there likely isn't a Worlds and it's just all these grand tournaments, which I'm kind of saddened by. Obviously, like I said before, the competitive experience is why I'm here, and if there's no champion, it doesn't really make sense. But I still think they can make a pivot and say that there is Worlds with no invites and just say that that's Adepticon and they left it out. I think that as a company, that's what I would do. I would honestly, this announcement is way too long for what it should be and gives way too much supporting evidence as to why they made this decision, which is kind of an indicator of how it's a bad decision for the community that they had to give out this much context in order to take away Worlds.
Yeah, it's like when somebody's talking and you can tell that they don't believe what they're saying and they keep talking and you think to yourself, are you trying to convince me or are you trying to convince yourself? And that's kind of what this announcement reads like. It's so much information and background and justification and rationalization, but it it doesn't amount to anything. The stuff they bring up here doesn't make any sense and they contradict themselves, and so it's just fluff. But yeah, I see what you're saying of we don't know for a fact that Worlds is going away. Maybe Adepticon will have a grand tournament, or maybe Adepticon will still have Worlds and it'll be an open event, which would be very cool. Anybody who wants to come to Worlds can come, and you sign up by a certain day, and then they figure out how to accommodate however many people sign up, which would still give us that experience of the international community So I guess there's still hope from that. It's just in the announcement it says, you know, how the grand tournament differs from Worlds, etc. And we can get into the announcement they shifted out. I think it might have been the one that you were originally reading, 2024, 2025 organized play grand tournaments, and talk about that.
I would actually like to talk about that, yeah, because in there they offer links to the rule sets for each of these tournaments, and I have some evidence to support why I think that there will be something as large as Worlds again, and that goes in page 8 of the Armada rules. So here they say the basic structure for each tournament should be for each subset of players, there will be this many Swiss rounds, and then there will be a cut, or the cut could be 0 people, so like no cut at all. And for many of these tournament styles, they have on the basic structure, 48 and above has no cut. So what they're doing is they are substituting the day 2 cut for more Swiss rounds, and then that would allow everyone a chance to continue playing in the tournament and not feel left out. And the same is true similarly for the advanced structure, where they have 91 and above players listed, which there were no World Open qualifiers that had that many players. So this leads me to believe that they will, or they anticipate having something like Worlds, where there are that many players, and they go up to a number of 5 Swiss rounds, as opposed to 4 for a day, which 5 Swiss rounds to me sounds like it's going to be a 2 day event with 3 Swiss rounds on one day, 2 Swiss rounds on the second day, and then a final game or a bracket of, in the case of 91 and above, the top 4 players. So to me, it sounds like what they're doing is the day 2 cuts and all the cuts that were taken uh, feel like an exclusionary event where now I have to sit on the sidelines and watch. But for competitive players, if you've got your head on right, that's an excellent time to sit down and watch some excellent games being played, no matter what game you're playing, Armada, Legion, X-Wing, whatever. And then, so they expand the Swiss, and then there'll be a top cut of 4 people. And so then you have a small bracket. And for me, I think it should be larger, but I can see why they did it as 4 people so that they could limit it to a maximum 4 games in a day. And that also makes sense because like day 1 being 3 Swiss rounds feels a lot better than 4 Swiss rounds, which is just a grueling process of elimination. And it feels bad to go through one day of playing and then getting cut and then maybe packing up and going home. So this way, people who aren't in the top still have an opportunity to play in the tournament on day 2 and have 2 games, which is enough to keep someone around, as opposed to either being cut or just playing one game. So I think that's what they're doing. I think there will be something. I could be wrong. I won't say that I would be happy to be wrong, but I think there would be something like Worlds in the future where it uses this structure. And that's kind of where my evidence comes from.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I think there are a lot of people out there that hope you're right, and we just don't know. One question I think I'd like to ask, because really a lot of this stuff is just a wait and see. A lot of this stuff is just we're gonna have to figure out what's gonna happen. But my question would be, when was this in the works? When did they start working on this? Worlds was less than a month away, or less than a month ago, and now they came out with this announcement after the largest Worlds ever for Armada. And I get it's for Armada, Legion, Shatterpoint, X-Wing, Marvel Crisis Protocol, like all those games, but I have to believe that this was in the works before Adepticon. Stuff like this doesn't just pop up overnight, or maybe it does. I mean, you read this announcement and look at how poorly articulated it is, and maybe somebody did just decide last week, hey, let's do this, and they ran with it. But yeah, there, like you said, there's links to all the tournament regulations for all these games. It goes into detail about how it's different from the world system, how it will be ran, and here are the big takeaways. This was my biggest takeaway of these 2 announcements. And if you're a TO and you're listening to this, please, please listen to this. all applications for GTs have to be submitted by May 1st. You have 2 weeks to submit an application for your tournament. And you can do it here on the AMG website. There's a link to an online application. It's got some basic information. It'll ask you about the retailer and the venue and your information as the organizer. It lists the requirements for the event, such as it has to be held in person, has to be open to the public, minimum of 32 players, has to have at least one judge for every 16 players. So there have to be at least 2 judges, but probably 3 for if you're over 32, or if you're over 48, apparently there have to be 4 judges. And it has to follow the relevant rules in this packet. So again, if you want to do a grand tournament, you have 14 days to submit your application, and I hope that plenty of people do, because I would like for the game to continue, and I think the community will still play. I haven't seen anything calling for a boycott. I wouldn't want a boycott. I don't even want to bring up that term, but that's just cutting off your nose to spite your face. If you enjoy playing Armada competitively or otherwise, and there are events in your area, go do it. It's a very fun game. It's a great community, and I would highly encourage you to continue to hang out with your friends. AMG doesn't care if you show up or not, apparently, but your friends do. And I know there are people that I enjoy seeing every time I go to a tournament, and there's a news story. I've been talking to people that I met at Worlds or before Worlds that live all over the country about traveling to a store championship that they may host just to meet, their local people, or see their local store or whatever. And I think I would rather do that than attend, these great big grand tournament events or whatever. But hopefully I can try and do both. I don't know. But I would still encourage people to try and make it work. Try and do the best that you can with what we're given.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I do think the last 2 episodes we've talked about how healthy of a state Armada has been in competitively, and then we get handed this. I'm not really convinced by my own argument earlier that there will be a Worlds, but I think that evidence is it's kind of nice to see. I don't think like I said, I'm not convincing myself with that argument, although I think it'd be cool. And I do think, from a business standpoint, I think our Atomic Mass Games as a whole needs to pivot away from this decision. I think there's space in their announcement for this pivot. I don't know if they did that on purpose to try and allow themselves a backdoor, but I can't see. I don't see this going well for them over the next year if they try to force this upon people. Yeah. So just to wrap up, I'd like to say, Armada is in a good place. Based on the interview from Wilczek and their track record of releasing rapid reinforcements, I do think that there will be a Rapid Reinforcements 3. They're probably working on stuff in the background. Not new, I don't know, probably not new plastic, but I am looking forward to what they do with Armada. I am looking forward to see if they pivot away from this decision, but I'm not really holding my breath. And I think a lot of people in our community have lived through a lot of these scenarios before where people scream Armada's dead, but it continues on nonetheless. So with that, I'd like to say, stick it out, keep playing the game you love to play, and there still is competitive opportunities to play. So where that is, go ahead and seek that out. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I've got one final hot take, since this is Speculation Station and you like to do an elevation segment at the end. I want to call for the elevation of a grand tournament to a global crowning. I don't know. Maybe there's a better word for that, something like World Championship or something. But one grand tournament maybe that kind of culminates in the ultimate champion of Armada for the year. from the whole world. And maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe they'll say, hey, this grand tournament, all the grand tournament winners get to come to Worlds and they get to automatically make it to day 2. And that's your prize for being a grand tournament winner. And they'll still have Worlds or something like that. But I don't know. That'd be cool.
Well, if you're going to elevate something, I'm going to elevate something. I've had this one in my back pocket, but I think they should give the Nebulon bees a keyword called Fortify and gives them opportunity to use their braces twice.
Ooh, like each brace once, or you can just use a brace 2 times?
So if you get slapped by a big shot, you can brace and then brace again. But it doesn't break the game because if you have 1 accuracy or 2 accuracies, you can prevent it from happening. And the same kind of things that kill Nebulons, like the blink damage on the sides, or just mostly shots on the sides, period. The same kind of stuff still kills Nebulons. I think that would just make them a little more survivable. And the reason they're not taken mostly is because they can get one-shotted without a redirect. And I think that would kind of fix it. I would also like to see like just keywords added to the game, and I think that would add a lot of flavor to the game and expand the opportunities for the game. Like there's already some out there, like we talked last week about some of the Clone Wars factions having keywords that right now are meaningless. But I think just developing those and then maybe giving a ship or a squadron here or there to a keyword to change their playstyle, I think it would be great for the game.
Yeah, I like it. That's spicy. I'm playing Nebulons in the Battle for Hoth right now, and that's supposed to be a jank tournament, and I'm playing 4 Nebs. So I think, if I can make my braces work overtime, that'd help me out even more.
Yeah. Who's your commander?
Dodonna.
I like running Garm with Nebulons, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a hot take, I guess. Anyway, thanks everyone for listening in. If you have any comments, go ahead and put them underneath the YouTube video below, or I think you can add it in Spotify. I think there's a place for comments. But give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. Give us a follow on Spotify. And thank you for listening in, and stick with it.